Hi everyone. Good evening and thank you for tuning in to English Dharma services. My name is You Lu, and for the next 4 sessions, I will be talking about Purna Avadana, or the Story of Purna. Many of you, I believe, is familiar with Purna as one of the 10 great disciples of the Buddha, who is foremost in expounding the Dharma, and who is known for having the courage to teach in a barbarian kingdom. But many of you might not know about the life story of Purna. And so for the next 4 sessions, I will lead you through some of the events as recorded in Purna Avadana. Avadana is a term used to denote a type of story found in both Buddhist and non-Buddhist literature. Avadanas typically exhibit a 3-part narrative structure with a story set in the present context and a story set in the past. These 2 stories are then connected when the past actor is identified as a prior incarnation of the main character in the present. In contrast to the Jatakas, the main character in an Avadana is generally not the Buddha, but rather someone who is a follower of the Buddha, or someone who will become a follower. Avadanas are one of the 12 categories in Buddhist literary genres, and correlate a person's past with his or her present deeds, either lay or ordained, and who, in some specific fashion, exemplifies Buddhist ethics and practice. The Purna Avadana appears as the second of 38 narratives in the Diya Avadana. The Diya Avadana, which translates as divine exploits in Sanskrit, is a collection of 38 heroic tales or narratives. The present characters in the Diya Avadana stories are often identified as persons whom the Buddha encountered in a former life. Thus, these tales are narrated in similar structure as the Jataka stories, in which an event in the present offers an opportunity to recount a story from the past, which in turn illuminates details regarding present circumstances. Themes that run throughout the Diya Avadana include the realization of positive and negative consequences of karmic action, the importance of moral discipline, and the great merit that can be accrued through service or reverence offered to the Buddhas or to the sites related to the Buddhas, such as a stupa. The Diya Avadana includes 36 Avadanas and 2 sutras. There are several famous stories found in the Diya Avadana collection. One of them is the Purna Avadana, or the story of the monk Purna. The Asoka Avadana recounts the birth, life, and reign of King Asoka, a monarch highly revered in the Buddhist tradition as a great protector of the religion. Although there may be differences in style and language, more than half of the tales appear in the Mula Savastivada Vinaya. This association with the Mula Savastivada Vinaya suggests that these stories could date as far back as the beginning of the Common Era. However, the oldest extant manuscript of the Diya Avadana dates only to the 17th century, and no earlier Buddhist reference could be sourced. There is also no Tibetan or Chinese translation of the text, although many of these stories are found in the Tibetan and Chinese canon. This has led some scholars to conclude that although the stories themselves are old, the compilation of the Diya Avadana may have taken place much later. The Diya Avadana legends held a significant influence on Buddhist art and were often the subject of Buddhist sculptures and paintings. For instance, in the Sahasragata chapter of this collection, the Buddha describes the wheel of existence, or Bhava Chakra, which became a popular subject of painting in many of the Buddhist traditions. The Purna Avadana is one of 1,000 Avadanas found in all the extant recensions of the Avadana. The Purna story is also found in the Tibetan translation of the Mula Savastivada Vinaya, in a number of versions in the Pali commentaries and elsewhere. I found a similar narrative in the Chinese Sutra of the Wise and the Foolish, in the chapter of Purna, or in Chinese is 富那起源品. The Sutra of the Wise and the Foolish is a collection of Jatakas and Abhidhanas that related the karmic consequences of wise and foolish acts. The sutra consists of 13 fascicles, and the chapter of Purna is recorded in the third of 4 chapters in fascicle 6. I will be referring to the book The Deeds of Purna, a translation and study of the Purna Abhidhana by Joel Tettleman, and Divine Stories by Andy Rodman for the English translation. And I will make a few comparisons between the Purna Abhidhana and the Chinese Sutra of the Wise and the Foolish in the Foreground Buddhist canon as we go along. The Purna Abhidhana begins with the introduction of Bhava, a wealthy householder who lived in Suparaka with his wife and sons Bhavila, Bhavatrata, and Bhavanandin. One day, Bhava fell sick, and because of his abusive language, his family abandoned him. As they left, a slave girl remained behind in the house and took care of Bhava. She got him some medicine, and eventually Bhava regained his health. Bhava reflected on how his family abandoned him and how the slave girl took good care of him. He decided to reciprocate her kindness. He asked what she would like to have as a reward, and she replied that she would like to have a son with him. She reasoned that this was the only way that she could be freed from the slave caste, by having a relationship with an Aryan. So they slept, and the slave girl gave birth to a boy after 9 months. The baby boy was good-looking, handsome with fair complexion, and had an umbrella-shaped head, long arms, a broad brow, eyebrows that joined, and a prominent nose. The boy was named Purna and was taken care by 8 nurses. When he grew older, Purna was instructed in reading and writing, arithmetic, accounting, finance, debt collection, commercial law, as well as in the inspection and the assessment of jewels, property, elephants, horses, and young men and women. In these 8 examinations, he became an eminent authority, wise and skilled in the traditional learning. At a young age, Purna had shown an adeptness in running business. When his brothers went out across the ocean to trade, he was asked to look after the family business due to his young age. When his brothers returned from their business trips, Bhava tallied the profits that each of them had earned, and Purna had earned even more than what his brothers had. After some time, Bhava sensed his imminent death and thought up a strategy to keep the family undivided. He instructed his eldest son, Bhavila, to take care of Purna. Not long after, Bhavatrata and Bhavanandin proposed to split up the house, the family business, and Purna among the 3 older brothers. Because Bhavila had been instructed to take care of Purna, he chose Purna over the house and family business. After that, Bhavila and Purna were driven out from their family house and shop, and they set out to live with their relatives. One day, Purna was asked to get breakfast for Bhavila's son. He went out to the market and found a man who was trembling as he was carrying a load of wood. Purna was expert in the assessment of different types of wood. He began to examine the load of wood and saw that it was Gosirsa sandalwood. Purna bought the sandalwood with 500 silver coins and cut up the wood into 4 smaller pieces, each to be made into fragrant powder and sold at double the price. Sometime later, the king of Suparaka became afflicted with a high fever. His physicians prescribed Gosirsa sandalwood, and so his ministers undertook a search for some. Eventually, they found Purna, who sold Gosirasa sandalwood to the ministers at 1,000 silver coins. And we can see from here that Purna is pretty good in doing business. Back in the palace, an ointment prepared from the sandalwood was applied to the king's body, and the king regained his health. The king remarked, "The sandalwood is hard to get. From whom did you get this?" "Lord, from Purna." "Summon Purna." Later, a messenger from the king arrived and announced for Purna, "Purna, the king summons you." Purna began to think, "Why has the king summoned me?" And then it occurred to him, it must have been because of the Gosirasa sandalwood that the king had used to regain his health. And that is why he summons me. Well, I certainly must take along some of the sandalwood when I go. Having wrapped 3 pieces of the sandalwood in a cloth and carrying 1 piece in his hand, Purna went before the king. The king asked him, "Purna, do you have any sandalwood?" "Lord, I have 1 piece." "What is the price?" "Lord, 100,000 gold coins." "Do you have any more?" "Yes, Lord, I do." And Purna showed the king 3 other pieces. The king gave a command to his ministers, "Give Purna 400,000 gold coins." Purna said, "Lord, give 300,000. 1 piece is a gift to my Lord." And so Purna was given 300,000 gold coins. The king said, "Purna, I am extremely pleased. Tell me, what boon should I give you?" Purna replied, "If my Lord is pleased with me, may I be permitted to live in your kingdom undisturbed." The king gave a command to his ministers, "From this day forth, you may give orders even to the crown princes, but not to Purna." At the same time, there were 500 merchants who arrived in Suparaka on ships laden with treasures. The Merchants Guild was at Suparaka had a rule that people are not allowed to purchase goods directly from the merchants. Only the guild can do that. However, Purna approached the merchants and bought all the goods with a deposit of 300,000 gold coins. Sometime later, agents from the Merchants Guild came to see the merchants and was told that the goods were sold to Purna. The agents returned to the Merchants Guild and levied a fine of 60 silver coins against Purna for going against the guild's rule. The king's officers saw what happened and reported this incident to the king. The king then summoned Purna and the members of the guild, and when asked about the levy, Purna spoke up saying the guild has set up a rule without informing him or the other merchants. When the king asked the members of the guild if that was true, they replied saying yes, and the fine was dropped. Sometime later, Purna decided that he should cross the ocean to gather trade goods for himself. And having earned a name in the business field of Suparaka, he attracted 500 merchants to make the journey with him. He crossed the ocean 6 times, and each time his ship was filled with riches. When the 500 merchants asked to cross the oceans for the 7th time, Purna decided that he would no longer seek for health, but would still cross the ocean with his 500 companions. On this trip, there was one night during the time before dawn. Those merchants recited passages aloud and at great length. These are verses from the sutras. Purna listened to them and said, "Sirs, you sing beautiful songs." They replied, "Great caravan leader, these are not mere songs. You must know that these are the words of the Buddha." Hearing the name Buddha, which he had never heard before, Purna got goosebumps all over. All attention, he asked, "Sirs, who is this person named the Buddha?" They told him, "There is a Shramana by the name of Gautama, a prince of the Sakya lineage, who having cut off his hair and beard and donned yellow garments, with right faith went forth from his home into the homeless life. He has fully awakened to supreme perfect enlightenment. He is called the Buddha." The Chinese Sutra of the Wise and the Foolish had a different version to this part of the story. After the merchants had accumulated trade goods as planned, they were returning from their voyage when they saw a sign at sea. There were 3 suns rising from the horizon. One of the merchants on board remarked that one of them is the actual sun. The second sun is the eye of a Makara. A Makara is a legendary creature in India that has the features of a crocodile, a fish, and an elephant. And the third sun is the fangs of a Makara, which means they were heading towards Makara, and it is going to swallow them up when they go near it. At this time, a merchant who was a Buddhist asked everyone to recite the name of the Buddha immediately. The merchants then began to recite the Buddha's name, and when Makara heard the word Buddha, it closed its mouth and sank deep into the ocean. The merchants were freed from danger, and they were able to return home safely. Although there were 2 different versions of the story, what is consistent is that Purna was introduced to Buddha through his name. And we can also see that reciting the Buddha's name is meritorious and even saves one from danger. And we can also find something similar in the chapter of Universal Gateway, in which the Buddha told Sakyamuni Bodhisattva that if there are countless hundreds of millions of billions of living beings experiencing all manner of suffering, who hear of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva and call his name with single-minded effort, then Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva will instantly observe the sound of their cries, and they will all be liberated. In fact, it was recorded in the scriptures that Buddhas had their names made known to sentient beings, so that these beings will be benefited when their names are recited. For example, it was recorded in the Sutra of Infinite Life that when Amitabha was still practicing as a bodhisattva, he made 48 vows to liberate sentient beings. And one of these vows was that when he became a Buddha, all beings who recite his name will be able to be reborn in his pure land. And in this story, just by reciting the Buddha's name, he had saved Purna and his companions from danger. That implies the power of the Buddha's name, and that is also why recitation of the Buddha's name has evolved to become a Buddhist practice, especially in the Pure Land school. This also shows that all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas will not hesitate to help where their names are called. And Venerable Master Xing Yun has composed a song titled 又一下应板下, which means that when one calls the name of Avalokiteshvara, the call will be responded in 10,000 ways. After Purna came back with more wealth gathered from the voyage, his brother Bhavila thought that Purna should get married and settle down. And so Bhavila told his brother, "Purna, tell me which of the 2 I should ask on your behalf for his daughter in marriage, a wealthy merchant or a caravan leader?" Purna replied, "I am not seeking love. If you would permit it, I shall go forth from the life of householder." Bhavila asked, "When in our home there was no business, you did not go forth into the homeless life. Why do you want to go forth now?" Purna told him, "Brother, it wasn't the right thing to do then, but now it is appropriate." So having heard the name Buddha, Purna was determined to become a renunciate. But would his brother Bhavila agree to his request? We will find out next week. Thank you for tuning in again. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please remember to press the subscribe button and also to hit the bell button so you will be notified on the latest updates. Good night and see you next week.